You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to Thunderquack Perfect 10, the podcast where we explore pop culture masterpieces. I'm your host, Michael Cohen. What is a perfect 10? Simply put, a perfect 10 is a piece of pop culture media we love unconditionally. So throw away your review score because around here, everything is a 10 out of 10. Get ready to test your mettle as we take on red men, white men, and not so little green men because we're talking John Carter with Amanda Konkin. Amanda, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Mike. It's been a while since I have been on Thunderquack. It's so wild, but I'm excited.
I guess earlier this year, as we're recording this, but once it's released last year,
Yeah.
in February, we did the exclusive episode for the Patreon pledge drive. We talked about Star Wars, and
as we do.
and so here we are. It's actually, this episode is releasing specially for the 10th anniversary of Thunderquack. And so this is our like anniversary episode. And I
Nice.
figured who better to have on the special anniversary episode than you.
Than me.
As my
I
guest
was here
host,
at the beginning. Yay.
Yeah.
See
So
how far you've
I when I decided that you would be the person on this episode, because obviously, you know, when I was putting together the schedule for the year for Perfect 10, I was like, well, Amanda will be on an episode somewhere, but you know, what are we gonna do? And then I was like, well, it's the 10th anniversary, so I'll slot Amanda in there. And then I was like, what are we gonna talk about? And I at first I was kind of like, well, I don't know. Do we do another Star Wars, or like we did an episode of Quiver specifically about Man of Steel. I don't really want to get into that whole situation because we're right on the cusp of a new era of Superman. And that was like, in that thought process is when I went, well, one way that we can talk about both Superman and Star Wars
I love it. Yes.
is by talking about John Carter, because this story, A Princess of Mars, is literally the common ancestor of both of those worlds. So I was like, yeah, and I remembered that you loved the movie, even though you seem to have forgotten that you loved the movie. But it's okay. I reminded you, and you were like,
you reminded me, and I was like, oh yes, of course.
And yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this one, both the movie itself, but then just sort of Hollywood, and I think it's really interesting now, over 12 years later, to look at it and talk about what they did to this movie specifically, and the portent that it was, the way that it was like the canary in the coal mine and nobody paid attention.
Right.
Because now in 2024/2025, I guess, when people are listening to this, we're in a world where studios don't even do what they did to this movie. They just completely shelve movies and don't release them just to get the tax break. Almost like they made the movie to get the tax break in the first place. So we'll get into all of that, but before we do, I want to give the sort of the primer, as I do on our topic. So let's get into that. So John Carter is the film adaptation of the 1912 science fiction serial novel A Princess of Mars, starring Taylor Kitsch, Lynn Collins, Willem Dafoe, and Mark Strong. Released on the 100-year anniversary of the original publication, John Carter brings this foundational sci-fi epic into the modern era with stunning visual effects and an updated story. Considered one of the biggest box office flops of the modern era, Andrew Stanton's live-action directorial debut was actually ahead of its time with its skillful use of melodrama, romance, and action. Despite its critical reception and box office receipts, John Carter is the very definition of a perfect 10, with a brilliant script, phenomenal action set pieces, and wonderful performances. General audiences may have let this one get past them, but for those who love this film, it has become a cult classic, rivaling any modern blockbuster. For me, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I will fight anybody. Like, I'll fight anybody. It's been a long time since I sat and watched it, because when this movie came out in 2012, I saw it in the theater, I think 4 times, because I walked out of the theater and I was instantly in love with it. Like, obsessed. I read the first novel in the Barsoom series within the next 2 months, and then I've read the first 6 books in the series.
Nice.
And I actually
didn't know that you've read all 6 of them. Really?
Yeah, and I actually read them. Wow. I read them like words on pages.
On pages. Whoa.
Which is not something that I usually do, right? I'm more of an audiobook person, but yeah, I have actually read the first 6 books. I think that there are 12 or something, but not all of them were written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. It goes on. Yeah, as it continues, I think his son takes over at a certain point. Somebody takes over at a certain point and continues writing the Barsoom series, and then there are multiple adaptations of it. I mean, it's 100-year-old property, right? So it's been adapted into comic books, and there have been spin-offs and all sorts of things over the years. But this was meant to be its big, sort of pop culture zeitgeisty moment. And I think Andrew Stanton worked on it for a decade on getting it ready. It started as an animated film, which is why he was attached as the director in the first place. Coming from Pixar, and most notably as the director of Finding Nemo. And eventually became live action and became this massive project. And then released in May of I believe May, either April or May. Maybe it was April of 2012. What's the exact release date on this one? Oh man, IMDb fail me so often. At the top of the page, it just says 2012. Yeah, I believe it was. Oh, it was March 9th, 2012, in the United States, and later that year, Disney and Lucasfilm would announce that they were buying Star Wars and Lucasfilm from George Lucas.
Right. Yeah.
Which, when this movie came out, we had no idea. When everything went down with this movie, we had no idea. But 2 things came out of that purchase, that Lucasfilm purchase, that still upset me to this day. And it is 2 perfect 10 films. Their sequels got, one didn't even get close enough to a sequel, but the other one got its sequel going from a green light to a red light, because John Carter got completely screwed over by the Lucasfilm purchase, but Tron also got screwed over by it. People might not realize that was the case, but there was a sequel that was greenlit about 8 months after Tron Legacy came out. And Joseph Kosinski was set to, he directed Tron Legacy, and Garrett Hedlund was still all set, and Olivia Wilde, and everybody was all geared up to make the next movie, because obviously that movie ends with not quite a cliffhanger, but this is the beginning of a new story sort of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, because they bought Star Wars, Disney said, we no longer need these other things that we've been working on, because up until that point, they'd really, really been trying to establish a foothold in the what we would consider like the male sort of action sci-fi market, right?
Right.
And I Tron Legacy and John Carter were among those attempts. There were other ones like Prince of Persia, what else comes to mind? I don't know. There was a handful. In that era, they did a lot, and they were really trying to. They had the market cornered with the girls stuff, right, with the princesses and stuff, because they like Tangled and Frozen. I mean, I think Frozen also came out in 2012. They came out later that year, but they kind of knew what they had at that point,
Right.
and so they weren't worried about it, because they had the classic Disney princesses, and then Tangled was like a second renaissance for that, right? But they were like, okay, we got to figure out this other stuff. So in that effort, that was when they made the decision to buy Marvel in like 2010, right? And then they're cranking stuff out, but they wanted the sci-fi side of it, because Marvel was the superhero thing, but they really wanted a Star Wars, and they got one. They got one, and once they bought it, projects like Tron and John Carter were deemed unnecessary.
Yeah, fair.
And so it was determined that John Carter would be a tax write-off. And so they switched to the marketing. They changed the title of the movie from John Carter of Mars to just John Carter. They completely did a 180 on all of the marketing for it. They all they showed was the fight scene with the white apes. That was it. That was basically every piece of marketing, was just him and the white apes in the background, and every commercial, every trailer. They didn't show any of the rest of it. They didn't show any of the romance. They didn't show what the movie actually was.
And I remember not knowing what it was. And I remember you trying to be like, hey, Amanda, this is actually something that you would like. Yeah. Like, I feel like us having that conversation.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, yes, because I had it with everyone. But like you especially, right? Like it was definitely, I'm sure you could go back to an episode of Quiver where I was like, actually, well, this would be the year that Quiver started, wouldn't it? 2012.
Oh,
is that the year that? Yeah, that's the year that Arrow starts. Yeah. So this is before Quiver. So yeah. But I am sure that in that first season we talked about John Carter. Then I guarantee it.
I'm sure. Wow, yeah, it started in 2012. That's crazy. And I remember the stuff that you're talking about, and it's like you've read the books, but the only book that I started reading actually was John Carter and the Gods of Hollywood, and it was like the whole investigate, or like just like the breaking down like what happened with this movie, and I thought that was fascinating. So everything that you're talking about there, just if people want to know more about it, I'm like, go read that book, because
it's not
like it's wild.
What I'm talking about is not even speculation, right? There was that book, John Carter and the Gods of Hollywood, was a piece of journalism. Like it's not a like a biography or like a behind the scenes or anything like that. Like it's a piece of actual like investigative journalism in the form of a book, like a paperback, because it is a very big story, and there's a lot there. But yeah, I think even when that book was published, because that book was published within the year of the film coming out, I don't think that they even had the full story at the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, this was published August 15th, 2012. Yeah. That's wild.
So that is. Here's the thing. Star Wars Celebration was also that year. It's a really funny thing, because we were at Star Wars Celebration that year. It was Celebration 6 in Orlando, Florida. And there was something going on, and we could all kind of sense it. There were
Interesting.
these rumors that there was going to be a massive announcement at the closing ceremony that like people were going to be floored, right? And it ended up, the big announcement at the closing ceremony was Celebration Europe, that the next Star Wars Celebration would
Oh.
be in, I think it was in Germany. And we were all like, no, that's not it. That's not it. What's going on? Because George Lucas had been at Celebration 5, but he had been at Celebration 5 for one day of the 4-day convention. At Celebration 6, he was there the whole weekend.
Oh.
And he kept popping up at this panel and that panel, unscheduled appearances, right? At Celebration 5, he had a panel. Like, it was a big deal.
Right.
We,
Right.
had to sleep overnight in the line to get wristbands, even though you're already at the convention. You've already paid to go to the convention, but then you have to like line up and sleep outside overnight in order to get your wristband in order to get into the panel the next day. At C6, he did not have his own dedicated panel. But he showed up to a bunch of things, and there was the rumor that there was going to be a massive announcement, and it didn't happen. But in the lead up to the closing ceremonies, a bunch of us were like, man, wouldn't it be wild if they were like, if like George Lucas just walked out and he was just like 7, 8, 9, drop the mic, done. Like a huge crowd, like the roar of the massive crowd and everybody in Orlando freaking out at the same time. And like we were so close to the truth of what that was. And it was a couple months later in October that we got the official announcement that Disney was buying Lucasfilm and they were making Star Wars 7, 8, and 9. And so there were a lot of us that were like, it was supposed, they were doing the deal, like it was happening, and they were trying to get it done before the end of Star Wars Celebration. Like guaranteed that that's what that whole sort of hubbub was about, and that behind the scenes sort of like, because it like anytime you talk to anybody, any of like the Lucasfilm publicity or whatever, they were like, don't, make sure that you are at the closing ceremony. You do not want to miss the closing ceremony. And
Oh,
we were like,
interesting.
why? And they're like, we cannot, like, I can't tell you why. I'm just telling you that you have to be there. And it was like, okay, yeah, like we're gonna be there, but all right. And then it was like Star Wars Celebration Europe, and we're like, that, no, there's no way that was the big reveal, right? So yeah, I always, I look back at that year and I go like, they knew, like Disney knew, they knew it was a $4 billion deal, right? Like they knew
Right.
before John Carter
Way
came out
before. Yeah.
that this was happening. Like George had gone to them already, and they were just trying to get stuff lined up, right? So yeah, this book having come out in August of that year, it's like, books don't usually happen quite that fast. That's why I say like it was investigative journalism, right? It wasn't
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't a book. It was an article that turned into a book because the story got too big to be published in a magazine or a newspaper, right? But yeah, so all of the stuff that I talk about when I talk about how Disney intentionally tanked the marketing on this, didn't push it to the audience that would have shown up, and actively went out of their way to make it look bad, with essential, I mean, like this would happen a lot at the time with like unfinished visual effects being in the trailers, right? It's like
Right. Yeah.
this still needs another like 3 or 4 passes, but we got to put out a trailer. Nowadays I think they're a lot more savvy about um only putting sort of like very finished stuff in the trailer, to the degree that like a lot of the Marvel stuff is actually modified for the trailer. Like it's not even the final shot. Like it's like they did the final shot, but then like Spider-Man No Way Home is a really great example where they removed the lizard and and Electro from
Oh yeah.
the one of the shots, right? That or no, Lizard and Electro. I can't remember. They removed the other Spider-Man, right? Like it's
Right.
just Tom Holland in a bunch of the shots, but like now we know you can compare it, and it's like there are other. It's that they had removed them because there's like one frame in one of the trailers where they're Spider-Man is jumping from one side, Lizard, Sandman, and Electro are
Oh
jumping from the other
yeah.
side, and
Yeah.
Lizard
And they've
like gets
removed them.
punched in the face,
Right. And you can
but
like
there's nobody
see it.
there.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, and that was where the rumors of like there being other Spider-Men in that movie
Right.
started.
Right.
But yeah, like that's where we're at now with modern marketing stuff, is that like, yeah, those shots were done to the point that they were like, tweak them, get rid of those other spider guys. But back in 2012, you would get sort of like half finished VFX shots in a trailer because it's like quick, right? It wasn't. You also have to like put this in time. It's so funny how much things have changed even since 2012. But in 2012, YouTube is only like 6 or 7 years old. It's really only been popular for 4 years. Like it's really only been like an actual video platform for like a handful of years. So the idea of us like being on YouTube and scrutinizing trailers and stuff like that it was new. It was that the industry hadn't adapted to it yet. Right. But Disney specifically hampered the marketing effort on this movie, and like made it intentionally confusing, and sort of like did not put
that's
their
the
best
worst
foot
thing.
forward.
Like it's not even that it was trying to be something different, it's that it was confusing. And that's like the biggest thing, because it's such a red flag for people, because if you can't hook anybody and nobody knows what's going on, then you're not getting anybody, right? So it's I don't know, it's worse than being kind of like marketed to the wrong people. They just they just were like, oh yeah, no, it's brutal. And there's a lot of talent in this movie too. Like it's the biggest thing is probably just the people that got sort of caught in the like backlash of the movie. And like I think they talk about that too in the book, is like just, I don't know, I feel like Taylor Kitsch, is that his name? Kitsch? I don't know. Didn't do like a lot of stuff after that. And like, what was he an X-Men like after or before this?
I feel like I believe that X-Men Origins Wolverine is it's either before or it is the same. It's before. It's 2009. Yeah.
Okay.
So in 2012 he starred in John Carter as well as Battleship.
Oh.
And he had already done
nice.
He'd already done the bad turn as Gambit in X-Men Origins Wolverine. So it was sort of even
what a bad year for him. Oh no.
Yeah. Even though he had kind of gotten his critical acclaim off of Friday Night Lights, his transition to the big screen did not go the way that I think that he was hoping that it would.
Just selfishly, I forgot that he was Canadian. He would be a good up for grabs person to lead, like for people that need CanCon content. I'm like, I wonder if there's any films that he wants to be in Canada. Like, oh man.
He's not just a Canadian boy. Like he's I'm pretty sure he's from the Okanagan. Like he's
oh my gosh, he is Kelowna.
Yeah, he's from Kelowna.
Whoa,
right?
Yeah, and
he didn't even want to be an actor. He wanted to play hockey in the NHL, and
I feel like way worse for him now.
So it's one of the it is
Bummer.
Definitely one of those things. It sucks because this movie should
have been good. Should have been popular. It was good. It should have been popular.
It should have been a massive film. And man, we got about, I don't know, you have to ask Crystal, but I think that we were about maybe 20 minutes into the movie. And I started to it all started to come flooding back because it had been so long since I'd watched it.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I forgot how funny this movie is. Like, I forgot how like genuinely good the comedy is. And it's when he first gets to Mars and he's jumping and he lands and he sees the things and they scream and he's like, where the hell am I? Where on earth am I or whatever? And it's like, haha, you're not on Earth.
Yeah. Yes.
And then Tarkus shows up and we get the exchange between the two of them. And I said to Crystal, I was like, I was so worried that this movie wasn't going to hold up when I decided that we were doing this for Perfect 10, because it's probably been 2 or 3 years since I've watched this movie from start to finish. So I was like, oh my God, did I make a mistake? Like,
Right,
have I made a
yeah,
mistake?
yeah. Yeah.
Was it just like recency bias? Am I crazy? And started watching it and was like, oh, yeah, it's good. But then you get to Mars and you get to that moment and you get to the interaction with him and Tars, and I was like, first of all, Tars looks fantastic,
Great for 2012.
unbelievable,
like,
right?
I was really that actually was the one time I noticed the special effects, or like the it's Thurn, yeah, what are they, Thurn? Anyways,
No, they're the Tharks. The green ones are the Tharks. Yeah,
Tharks. Oh yeah, the Thurn is okay. So the Tharks was like, there's one scene where they all run past him and some go in front and some go behind, and it was the first time where I saw the special effects, and I was like, and it's like pretty far into the movie, and I was like, oh, good job on the special effect, because you don't notice them until you notice them, and that was a moment for me where I was like, oh, they did actually like a pretty good job with that. I will say my biggest pet peeve though about like the jumping, and the movie doesn't really start until it gets to Mars. Exactly what you're saying. It's like, I feel like I was watching it kind of like on my phone. I've watched this movie in pieces over the last 2 days. I had kind of a terrible personal couple family things, and so I've just sort of been it's been nice, like, reprieve to be doing like when I have a moment. But like the first little bit was kind of hard for me because I was also like wasn't like sitting and totally focused on like a big screen. I was like on my phone. I was like, oh, this movie starts so slow, and I was like, oh no, you gotta get to Mars, but you just like gotta get there, and then it's fun. But I will say it does bother me that he was so quick to walk fine after, like, they just made such a big deal of him not being able to walk and then jump, and then immediately he walks up the hill, and I'm like, no. And I didn't want them to do the like Avatar thing, because I don't know if I think Avatar was like after this, but like one of my biggest things in hindsight going back to watch this movie is like the like outside savior complex and how people treat that, and like this, I'll give it to it because it's an old book, and so it's, it predates all of these things and has been used for good, but a lot of the like sort of savior stories,
there's a couple of things on that, right? And I think it is one of like the most important things to talk about with the film adaptation. Avatar is 2008, so this is 4 years after Avatar. Which Avatar very much inspired by A Princess of Mars, as is Star Wars, as is Superman. This is the common ancestor of most modern sci-fi, fantasy sci-fi for sure. Like if you are in the comic book sci-fi, Marvel or DC side of things, then A Princess of Mars is absolutely an inspiration for all of that. That entire world doesn't exist without that story first, right? Because he is literally the first superhero. And then on the Star Wars side of it, it's like Dune is inspired by A Princess of Mars, right? Like Star Wars is inspired by it. It is anything that is on that sort of fantastical sci-fi side of things is going to have at least some of its DNA coming from A Princess of Mars, right? The other side of sci-fi being the more hard sci-fi side of things, like Heinlein and Bradbury and that sort of thing, right? That's a little bit more of the like less about. It's all about humanity, right? But that hard sci-fi tends to like put the lens on humanity, whereas
Right. Yeah.
fantasy sci-fi is more about the idealism of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really great sci-fi is the stuff that manages to marry the two, and that's why like Stars, Trek, and Wars are at the top of the pile, because both of those take the hard sci-fi and the idealistic sci-fi, and they blend them together, right? But
Right.
A Princess of Mars is tricky. And when you read it, you have to read it in the same way that you would read Shakespeare. You have to read it in the same way that you read Chaucer or any classic literature, right?
Yeah,
it's 100 years old, right? Now it's 112 years old. It was written at a different time from a different perspective. John Carter himself is a character. He is a hero, an unlikely hero from an unlikely source. He is a Confederate soldier.
Yeah.
And he's a decorated Confederate soldier.
Yeah.
He fought hard for the Confederacy, right? Like, but in the novel, that is not a thing that is sort of there's no kind of like equivocation about that. It's a matter of fact, right? Whereas in the film, the way that they adapt it is that it's like he is not proud of what he did for the Confederacy, right? Like he followed orders and has a lot of demons as a result, right? And then what happens to his wife and his daughter is kind of like the implication there is that is a direct result of those choices that he made, right? That being a decorated, well-known soldier led to his family being killed because of him.
I didn't get that.
Like that's the implication.
I wondered, actually, I will say that I didn't. The scene where he's fighting, like where they flash back between like what happened to his family and like I was like, why is this so heavy-handed? But it does make sense that it's like he said that he wouldn't fight for causes because like it makes more sense now with that context, what you're just saying to me, because it's like, oh, is it worth like what's worth fighting for or whatever it is, like anyways, that's okay.
And what Deja says to him, right? Because she says to him, she's like, no, I don't believe you,
right?
Like you will fight. Like there is something that you would fight for. Like you're not telling the truth, right? Like that sort of thing. And that's that scene is actually like right before that the scene that you're talking about, which is like, and her looking back and watching him and seeing the pain, right? Like that scene is from her perspective. We're seeing his flashbacks, but it's from Deja's perspective, because that's the moment when she falls in love with him, right? So we'll get to I want to finish what I was talking about before of like the historical context, and then we'll get into the romance thing, because the romance is the core of this movie. But I think it is really important to talk about the white savior component, because there is like this, A Princess of Mars is a white savior story. It's a white savior story where it's science fiction and he travels to Mars, but he becomes the hero of the Red Men of Mars. The Red Men of Mars were not a bunch of people with red tattoos as the film portrays them, because it adapts that. The Red Men of Mars were Native Americans. Right? Like if you read between the lines, Burroughs is really good about it in the way that he like,
well, he's calling them red men.
But he's using science fiction as this is what we talk about all the time, right? You and I constantly talk about this, that we use genre in order to put a different lens on the story in order to make a point, right? And Burroughs' perspective was actually that what was being done to the Native Americans was bad, right? Like, and in 1912, that's a controversial opinion, right?
Yeah, I
Like
guess
in
so. Yeah.
1912, they're still savages and, you know, like I less than human, right? To his contemporaries, to his peers. So he wrote this story as a way of writing about colonialism and uh, like sort of what was happening to Native Americans,
Right.
um, as westward expansion was happening, right? Like it was his way of sort of like telling that story without directly telling that story,
Right.
and then sort of like putting it all in a romance, right? Um, because in the novel, the bad guys are the Therns, and the Therns are the white men of Mars, right?
Right. Yeah.
And they are absolutely bad guys. Like they are like the same as they are in the film, but although it doesn't come it doesn't really come into play until the second and third book. There's stuff that kind of gets laid, like the groundwork gets laid in the first story, but it's the sequels that where it becomes really clear that that it's actually the the Therns that are the ones causing all of the strife, um,
Ah,
which was like
yes.
again like progressive isn't even the right word for it. It was almost like prescient, right? Like because the perspective that he was writing from, like nobody was thinking about colonialism and white people
Right.
in this way in the early 1900s, right? It was like he was decades ahead of his time in writing that.
I mean, popularly, I do want to give humanity the benefit of the doubt that
Sure.
some people were
Yeah,
engaged in that
oh, for sure,
conversation.
for sure.
But like, yeah, no, I
Yeah,
understand what you mean
yeah.
though, from like a popular perspective on like on such a stage and platform as this book. Like,
I mean,
reached.
Manifest Destiny was such a powerful piece of propaganda before propaganda even existed as a term, right? Like that the concept of Manifest Destiny of uh, you know I white Europeans basically, because they have the technology, because they have the force, right? Like
Mhm.
the strength to subjugate, that you know they have a right under God to claim land, to claim territory, and to do whatever they deem necessary in order to assert that dominance, right? Like it's such a wild concept by modern standard, although
Yeah.
it absolutely is happening in the world today. Um, I but yeah,
What?
like
You mean to tell
crazy,
us that stuff is still happening even
yeah,
though we
that we
haven't
haven't
learned
learned these
from it?
lessons, yeah.
We haven't learned these
Um,
lessons. It's almost as if science fiction will always be relevant.
yeah, but Andrew Stanton, I think, in adapting this, um, I think was very conscious of those things, and what you end up seeing is that, as opposed to the original story, this is the sort of thing that you're only going to get if you have read the original novel, and then compare it to the film. In the original novel, like John Carter just does everything himself, right? Like he is a one man army. He is Superman. He is Luke Skywalker. He's every hero in the American monomyth wrapped into one. He's the
Right.
first one. Like he's like the progenitor of that archetype, and he is instantly good at everything he tries. He's an incredible fighter. He's like a poet. Even though he has to learn the language, it's still like he learns it super fast. He learns it within a few months, and then is able to like woo Deja Thoris with his words. And yeah, like
Wait,
he
is
is.
that in the books? Does he actually have to learn the language? Because I will say
Yeah,
that was one of the biggest beefs that I have with the film. Is it's like
yeah.
drink this broth
I
and
said
learn
that
the
to Crystal.
language.
I said that to Crystal when we were watching it. I was like, this is really my only legitimate complaint about this film, is that they're like, we do not have time for a montage. Just give them some magic juice. But it's one of those things where it's like, we spent so long in Arizona or wherever the hell it was,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They had to get into
before
it.
he's
Yeah,
transported to Mars. We got to get this show on the road.
yeah,
We
yeah,
can't have a montage of him slowly learning the language.
yeah, yeah.
Because yeah, in it's funny because you get to the end of the movie and he teleports back to Earth, right? And he wakes up and he's got this big long beard, and Colonel Powell is a skeleton,
Right. Yeah,
which tells us like, oh, it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah.
This was not like he hasn't been gone a couple of days, right?
So actually, my question about that is, does Earth
Yeah.
time just pass a lot faster, or was that just a mismatch in the storytelling?
I think what it ends up being is a mismatch in the storytelling.
Okay.
As great as this movie is, there were production problems. Like it did go through a lot of issues, and that's where the sort of the bad press started. Is that like I said, like it started as an animated thing, and it turned into live action, and it was going in one direction, but then Disney was like, no, you got to do this, and they kind of, there was a push and a pull, right? And so stuff like the magic juice, I don't think that was Andrew Stanton's decision. I think that was Disney saying, you gotta do this faster. You gotta get him. We can't expect people to read these subtitles for 45 minutes. Right? You gotta do some magic, and then he understands.
Can you remind me how the movie starts? Like, does it start with a fight sequence? It doesn't.
It starts. It starts. I think like the opening shots are of him, like in the town or whatever, right? Because it's his narration.
Yeah, and he's like trying to, and he's like, and then so.
And then it introduces Ned, and then we get the whole thing of like him being dead and all that stuff. Yeah.
So, are we ready to talk? Do you still have to talk about the historical context, or can we talk about the movie a little bit?
No, I'll just say that there's a lot of stuff that as it was written would be problematic to put into a movie today, right? The fact that none of the red men, by which I mean the race of red men of Mars, Heliumite, Zadango, whatever, nobody wears a top ever, like because they're on Mars, and Mars is a desert, so it's like hot. Right. And so like it was written into it that like they're all topless. The women are topless all the time. Like their boobs are just hanging out. So it's like stuff like that was very much it was the stuff that like obviously like Edgar Rice Burroughs was trying to sell his story. It was published serialized chapter by chapter in a magazine. And it had to, it was pulp, right? It was he was doing stuff that his core audience, men, would want to read about, right? So it was very like titillating in that way, and sort of like exploitative. And it was very much like there was very much like the noble savage sort of aspect to the red men, and to Deja Thoris specifically. She is also very much a princess of Mars, and she does not fight. She is not a warrior. In that first book, she is a damsel in distress, and he rescues her, and then he does all of the fighting. So the film takes a lot of that problematic stuff, and it actually turns it into like a feminist movie. Like the film is very feminist, as he's like get behind me, and then she takes the sword, she watches him, and he's great with the sword, and then she's like, okay, cool, but watch this, and he's like, maybe I should get behind you. And and then they like call back to that at the end of the movie in the final action sequence, right? Like the film is very like pro woman when the source material is very not and it was actually one of the places where like the staunch fans of A Princess of Mars, your typical bad actors, the type of people who would say certain things about Star Wars nowadays, they were very upset with the film because it didn't portray Deja in that light. It portrayed her as being a character much more like Leia or Padme, right? Right. As these like badass women who can handle themselves. So this is a post Buffy,
Buffy world,
strong female character, right?
Love it. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's all the context I think that we need. Now we can get into it. Where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, in terms of like so first of all, the context that I didn't have for this beforehand too. Mm-hmm. And even I think when I was watching it is like Andrew Stanton, and who he was, because what I noticed on the end of this one was I was like, it was dedicated to Steve Jobs. And I was like, whoa, did he die 10 years ago or 12 years ago or whatever long it's been since that, which was wild. But it also makes way more sense that he's one of the original Pixar guys. Like, and was there from the very beginning. But kind of interesting, like, again, just like another sort of, doesn't that suck for you that you like got this far with this film and it took forever. But he's written like it wasn't just Finding Nemo, right? Like WALL-E is one of my faves, I think, of the Pixar movies. And I'm like, that is like, anyways. But to talk about the film itself, because these are like, again, going into it, and we talked like sort of what you were saying about that I forgot that I like this movie, because back you were like, when you first asked me to do the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, John Carter for sure, because I'm pretty sure that we podcasted even about it on Geeks versus Nerds. Didn't we do a John Carter versus something?
No,
like
I
or was that just you? Like, I can't remember. There was something Geeks versus Nerds about.
Yeah, John Carter. we did do a Geeks versus Nerds. It was John Carter versus Aquaman for who's the worst superhero.
Yeah. We did, and we totally did. We totally did it, and so we have like talked about John Carter at length. And so that podcast exists on the internet somewhere if people want to hear us talking about John Carter. But I don't remember anything about John Carter, and it's been years, because that would have been years ago. And so but what I did remember is that it was like Superman and like all of the things that I really did love. And then when it came time to it and we were like, oh, aren't we supposed to podcast soon? And you're like, yeah, we're supposed to podcast about John Carter. I was like, oh, why John Carter? Can we do something else? And you're like, no, Amanda, we talked about doing John Carter. And I was like, oh, well then I have to rewatch John Carter. And I was like, okay, fine. But sitting down to be like, okay, I know that I like this movie, and mostly what it is just like that, those origins of like watching it as a superhero, like origin story, like for like Superman, or like where that comes from is so cool. But then also going into it, because I didn't have all the context of how upset I should be on behalf of the filmmakers for the film. So I went into it being like, okay, how critical should I really be about this film? And then if there's a few things where you're like, oh, I wonder if they intentionally mucked it up in the editing as well. Because there are some things about this film that not only in how it was marketed to you, but also in how it was packaged like as a creative story endeavor, also is a bit just disjointed. Because the movie itself, like you had messaged me before I watched it, and you're like, I forgot that this movie is just a bunch of stolen glances. And I was like, oh yeah, a lot of it is romance, but also it's so action heavy, but also it's not set up like an action movie. Because an action movie, and this is like one of the things that I've been studying for like ages, is every time I go into an action movie, I'm like, what is the formula and are they sticking to it? And almost all of them, like you have to shoehorn in, doesn't matter how, action at the beginning of the movie. And I just watched Carry On over the holiday break. Like there's like a Netflix. And I'm like, even they were able to like put in this little like gangster fight scene at the beginning, or like a and I'm like, that was so weird. It should have started with the main character. Like, why did they diverge and show the villain first? And I was like, oh, because they needed to go formulaic, like this is an action movie and you need to start with action, not with making you fall in love with this character. Which again is like, are you a romance movie, or are you like, who do you care about and how do you care about people? Yeah. And there was some things throughout the movie where I was like, oh, if I had not known what this movie was, I went into it and there was a couple different times where the movie is different. Like it's like tonally different. And so that is, again, just coming back critically, it's all totally different in a way that I love. And so I will say, like, it's all the perfect pieces of like what I want, but I understand why after it would have gotten a bad rap, it wouldn't have been able to redeem itself. Yeah. Because I actually think it wasn't just about what they put on the surface. I do think exactly what you're saying, like that the studio would have said, hey, you have to have him drink this liquid instead of tell the story in a more interesting way. I'm sure that there are edit passes of this film that were better than the film that ended. And it could have been because they knew that not only did you confuse people in the marketing front, but also that if you don't really stick to certain storytelling tropes, because knowing what Andrew Stanton has written and how good those films are and how formulaic they are, he would have known that. And so now I'm just in discovering, like in going into this podcast with you and literally listening to you for the last little bit, I go, I wonder how much of this was also just set up in the actual film itself. Because there's a few moments like that where I'm like, oh, this this is an odd choice for this particular moment. But again, it feeds like this sort of overarching, like big arc story, but it also, I don't know, it could have been told on different. So I don't know if you had any of those moments where like tonally you were like a little bit jarred by stuff, because that's like my one thing where I'm like, oh,
well, I mean,
the
when I started watching it, and it's like you have that whole sequence at the beginning that is the framing device, right? Of Edgar Rice Burroughs writing himself into the story, because the way that it was written as the novel is that Edgar Rice Burroughs was publishing letters that he had received from his uncle John Carter.
Oh, cool.
So that's why the film is framed that way, right?
Because that's how it actually,
because
okay,
that's how, because that was like the conceit of it, right? In this, in the same way that like War of the Worlds is this radio that, like, when they did the radio play of like that it was like this real thing that was happening, and they were doing it like through the radio. Right. It was that same sort of idea. It was him being like, oh, I'm publishing these letters from my uncle, and like I've edited them, for content or whatever, but like this is if you believe it, this is what my uncle would tell me as a kid, right? And so he wrote everything down, and I have added my writer's flair to it, sort of thing. And that's what you'll be reading in these chapters as they're published. And so like the film uses that same conceit, because it has to, in order for the cliffhanger to exist, right? Like in order for him to get sent back to Earth, and then we find out that the whole thing was a plot for him to get back to Barsoom.
I will say that redeemed the whole freaking movie for me. Forgetting that that's the conceit of the movie is that he needs to get back and he doesn't. Like, I fully forgot about that. So it's kind of nice to go back to a movie that you haven't seen in ages and be like, I don't remember what actually happened at the end of this. And it was brilliant.
That was the thing, is that like I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It starts with this framing device, because at the end it's all like his ploy, because he needs the pendant and all that. I was like, okay, cool. And then we flash back to it's Arizona, I'm pretty sure, right? Where he's looking for gold or whatever.
Oh man.
And we're instantly introduced to the hero, John Carter, as not heroic, as comedic.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God, I forgot that this movie is like a romantic comedy. Like that's what
it's like a redemption story.
It is this sci-fi action movie that is actually like hiding a very melodramatic romance that is like peppered with comedy. It literally has everything. Like it literally has everything. So those tonal shifts, they're just, it's baked in, because like one moment where we have the great running gag scene of Bryan Cranston trying to deliver this monologue.
It's so great. Yeah, that is real great.
And he just like, he punches him. He's out the window. It's this, it's that. And he's like, listen, you're really trying my patience. And Bryan Cranston gives just an A+ performance.
I forgot he was in the movie. And
that was the other thing that I like locked in and was like, oh my God, I forgot how good everybody is in this movie. I forgot, because it's been so long. Like all of these other characters, not just Taylor Kitsch and Lynn Collins, but like Willem Dafoe gives a brilliant performance in this movie. And Thomas Hayden Church is a great bad guy, and Mark Strong. We didn't know who Mark Strong was when this movie came out.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
My biggest actor gripe, though, is those two guys that look freaking identical that are in the movie. Do you know who I'm talking about? The main bad guy, or the guy that's being manipulated. What's his name? And then James Percivoy or whatever.
Purefoy,
Purefoy.
So Cantos Can is James Purefoy's character, and then Sab Then is Dominic West's character. And yes, they look very similar.
It took me the whole
Yeah.
first 2 or 3 scenes that they're in, for me to be like, wait, is he pretending to be a good guy so that he can get her to marry? But I was so confused.
Cantos needed like he needed like an Errol Flynn goatee or something.
Just something to make him a little different. Like,
Yeah,
just something.
Just to give us a little bit of like, oh, okay, he's not. He'd be the hero of the story if John Carter wasn't here, right? Like he'd be the main character.
And the thing that's weird to me is like those actors don't look the same. Like I looked at the IMDb page to be like, wait, are these the same? Because I didn't know. I mean, full disclosure, and I don't know if people are better than me who watched John Carter, but I don't remember their names. Like the character names are not sticking with me, right? Like I barely remember what John Carter was like.
Listen,
called.
It's like we're talking about. Okay, I'm looking at IMDb and going down this line. We've got Tars Tarkus, Tal Hadjus, and Tardos Mors.
Yeah,
and
they're all very different characters.
Yeah, and then like on the female side, you've got Sola and Sarkoja, and it's like wait, what? And Sab Than, Cantos Can, everybody, all of the Martian names are very like similar. But that's just it's a Star Wars thing, right? Like it's the same as that.
Totally. And then, but when I look at IMDb, I'm like, Dominic West. I was like, oh, that's who that actor is. Because the picture that James has this beautiful, like, I don't know, people should look him up on IMDb. He looks this lovely, like distinguished dude with like a goatee. And I'm like, oh, that looks nothing like the character that looks like Dominic West in the movie. So anyways, I had to look at it a couple times to be like, wait, are these different people?
Yeah, for sure. But anyways. It's,
I do like that woman in the NYC alley was credited in IMDb, because I did notice that at the beginning of the movie where he just like is making out with some or pretending to like corner some woman in an alley, and she seems excited about it. And I'm like, this seems like the most unrealistic thing that happened in 1885. Anyways.
I don't know. Taylor Kitsch is pretty cute.
Sure.
He can get away with it.
That's fair.
Especially 2012 Taylor Kitsch. I mean, like, boy, oh boy. But this is the thing is that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that this is probably the beginning of me figuring out that I'm not just attracted to women, right? Is this movie, because I was so all in on this film and I couldn't figure it out. And like I said, it's been a few years, and in the last few years since I've watched this movie, I've had a lot of time to think about these sorts of things, and Oscar Isaac's been on a lot more stuff, so it's really like it's taken me from the point of like, am I just making jokes to I'm not just making jokes, and now I watch this movie and I go like, there's a reason why a lot of the male audience couldn't get into this. And it's because he is not portrayed as an archetypical male protagonist.
Oh, interesting.
He's viewed through Deja Thoris's eyes. We see him through the eyes of Deja Thoris throughout the entire film. He's a beefcake. John Carter is objectified in this film in the way that women are objectified in most action movies, right?
Yeah.
He's topless and his muscles are glistening, and we make a real point of like what a specimen he is. Quite literally, the Tharks are like look at him, like he's little, but he's like they're looking at it's like if you ever seen one of those pictures of a cat, like, and it's got like rippling biceps, and we as human beings look at it and go like, that cat's jacked, you guys. Like, it's like that. It's impressive. Like, he's still a cat, but like it's impressive, and that's the way that the Tharks are looking at him, right? They're like, he's no Thark. He's only got 2 arms. Like he's puny, but like, I don't know. You see him jump. It's pretty great. It's pretty cool. And so like, he is very much, like a femme gaze character.
Right.
And I think that like most men then don't connect with him as the protagonist of the story, because
that makes a lot of sense.
Because he's not like, because he like, the thing about him, the thing that makes him John Carter, it's the same thing that makes Superman Superman. It's the same thing that makes Luke Skywalker Luke Skywalker. and it's the thing that so many people misinterpret about these characters and in adaptations, is not the power that they have, right? Superman isn't Superman because he's strong. There's a dozen characters in the DC universe that can go, pound for pound in a fist fight with Superman, right? The Flash is faster in some instances, right? In some stories, right? Everything about Superman, there's somebody else who can do what Superman can do a little bit better than he can. But Superman's the whole package, because not only does he have all of that, but he's also got a heart of solid gold, right? Like he's got, like he has pure Ma and Pa, Kansas, Smallville ideals. He sticks up for the little guy. He's kind and gentle. He is soft, and yet he can push the Earth out of its orbit, right?
Right.
And it's the juxtaposition of that makes him Superman. It's what makes this new movie that's coming out so exciting, because that trailer shows us that that's what James Gunn is going for, right? It gets me so excited. John Carter in this film is the same thing. His morality, his ideology is way more important to him than fortune, than glory, than fame, than power, than any of that stuff, right? He wants money so that he can be left alone, because he doesn't want to have to deal with people, because he is heartbroken, right? That's
right.
So the whole beginning of the movie is that's what that is. He's not after gold for gold's sake. He's trying to find solace, right? And then he goes to Mars and he falls in love, and it heals him, right? And that's what Deja Thors falls in love with, is this broken heart. It's yeah.
But they didn't do either of those movies.
No.
I just, again, the way that you're describing it to me, I'm like, oh man, they could have made that the movie through exactly what you're describing, where it's only in hindsight do you understand who he is at the beginning of the movie, because it's not clear in the storytelling why he is who he is at the beginning of the movie, and you literally only find out when he's falling in love with another person, or the other person is falling in love with him as he's beating up a whole bunch of guys. That storytelling, the audience can't follow that except in hindsight. And that makes it set up to fail, because you can't go along with that arc, right?
There's a really brief moment early on in the film when he's in the jail cell, and Bryan Cranston is finally, because now he's in the jail cell, so Bryan Cranston can finally deliver his monologue. And he's like, okay, I'm not getting out of this, am I? And he says his piece. And when he does, he clangs his wedding ring and his wife's wedding ring, both on his finger, against the bar. And he's like, I've already, whatever it is you suppose I owe.
He says something, I've already paid
my debt in full, right?
But that doesn't mean, you don't actually, you're like, oh, you love somebody one punch, but you haven't seen it.
It requires you to do heavy lifting, and
exactly. People aren't willing to do that, man.
It's why the film fails, for sure. The movie fails not because it's a bad movie. The movie fails because Andrew Stanton was a little too clever in a few places. Right?
That's fair. And kind of gave people the benefit of the doubt, which maybe they didn't deserve.
Yeah. No, they don't. And that's, it's, I hate that. I hate that that's the reality of it, but there's a balancing act that you have to maintain when you're making a movie like this for this type of an audience. You can do this. You can be artsy and you can be clever in a movie that costs, $30 million to make, right? Yeah. But if your movie's going to cost $250 million in 2011 to produce, then you sure as hell better get everybody in that seat, right? This was one of the most expensive movies that Disney had ever made at the time, because the Marvel movies hadn't quite, this is a year after Avengers, right? So,
interesting. Okay.
Marvel is just kind of getting to that level at this point.
Right.
Because those early Marvel movies did not have the budgets. They didn't start as strong as they got, right?
Right.
but this movie, like, they spent a lot of money. It was like $250 to $300 million on this movie.
Yeah, it
Like
was something
it
wild.
was an
Yeah.
expensive film to make for good reason.
Hmm.
And it's all on the screen, right? But
Hmm.
like to me, the thing that I find the most fascinating about watching it in 2024 is how much this film takes a Princess of Mars, adapts it for a modern audience, and turns it into the type of story that Book Talk loses their mind over.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
Crystal's watching this with me, and she's just not just earlier this year, I think she finished reading through the ACOTAR series, right? And it was A Court of Thorns and Roses, and
Right.
I and she's like, oh, this is absolutely like a ton of this is that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
like I texted to you, like, so much of this movie is stolen glances, and
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just like, and
Yeah.
then bickering, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not quite enemies to lovers, but it is very much like they have an adversarial relationship at the beginning. She's lying to him, she thinks that he's lying to her, but he's not, and that's sort of the thing, is that it's like, no, he really is an alien from another planet. I like there's all this sort of like, it's all the romantic tropes, right? As they slowly fall in love with each other, and we go with them on that journey. But like you said, like, the movie doesn't fully commit to it in a way that it should have, in order to be that, right? But like, I
Because they
don't
wouldn't
like
have given anybody $250,000
it. Yeah, they wouldn't have made it, right?
to make
Yeah,
that movie. Like,
they wouldn't have made it, not
yeah.
in a million
Yeah.
years, especially
Yeah.
not in 2012. Maybe
Yeah.
today, with as
Yeah.
popular as all of the
Book
novels
Talk
that
movies.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
cartoon
Yeah.
versions of Adam Driver on the cover. Like
The best
yeah,
genre of book. Come
yeah, the
on.
best genre of book, which is Raylo fanfic, right?
Of course.
All of it, that's what it all is, you guys.
I hope everybody actually understands that legitimately
Oh
that's,
yeah,
yep,
yeah,
the majority.
this whole
Mhm.
era, right? Like, this
Oh
whole
yeah.
era of
Oh yeah.
fantasy romance, and
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
all of the like the
There's literally one I read that's
yeah.
literally just Adam Driver fanfic. But it's like, because it's like, just a person.
Yeah,
That
well, I mean, Love Hypothesis, which I am surprised is not a movie yet.
Yes, me too.
I don't
I
understand how it's
reread.
not a movie yet, but it is
So
literally a Star Wars
it's
fanfic,
it is.
and all of the
And I just
characters
have
are
to,
Star Wars characters. So it's
and just
like,
so everybody knows, Allie Hazelwood, who
yeah,
I cannot recommend enough, I literally read her books twice a year. Like, all of them. Like, she's written now like 5 maybe. And like, one of the latest ones just came out this year that was like about vampires and werewolves, and she did her first YA, like,
yeah,
even those ones. And then she's got like a pretty dark, like, not dark, but it's like different than her other books that I love. And oh my gosh, all of them. But they started as,
yeah,
like Adam Driver fan fiction. But there's a book that I've read that is literally, it's like Adam Driver. It's not even just the Star Wars. But anyways, people, go read some Adam Driver fan fiction. It
yeah.
is dope.
But yeah, all that stuff that's hugely popular, like this movie fits in that genre, right?
Yes.
And I think you're right. Like, I think with another edit
It
pass,
could
you
be.
could
Oh yeah.
you
It
could
could be.
crank
Yeah,
that
yeah.
up to 11, right?
Oh yeah.
But
Ooh, I'm feeling inspired. Ooh.
oh,
No
yeah,
wonder.
so I said to Crystal, I was like, I have to figure out how to get this information
Yeah.
in front of Book Talk. I have to figure out how to because if I can somehow get this into that
Could we re-release
community,
John Carter as a
yeah,
YA, or no, as a like Book Talk?
yeah,
Like, oh my gosh, yes.
yeah, as
Yes.
the women's romance, yeah, like,
It could
maybe
be,
there's still a chance. Maybe we can get the sequel made. Maybe.
It doesn't, by just re-editing. All you don't even have to reshoot stuff. I don't think. I think you could just literally re-edit like most of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Totally.
And of course, like, the score by Michael Giacchino, this was the film that like turned me on to him as a composer. Now, Star Trek predates this. That's 2009. So that would be like the first soundtrack that I really was like, oh, this Michael Giacchino guy, he's pretty good. But his soundtrack for John Carter was when I was like, oh, he's the new John Williams. Like he's the dude that'll take over for John Williams one day. And it hasn't quite happened because John Williams just doesn't retire. But I mean, Michael Giacchino did do a Star Wars soundtrack. He did Rogue One. He did the score for Rogue One, but and his son Mick is doing Skeleton Crew, and Skeleton Crew has a fantastic score. Oh my god, what a great score! This is one of those instances where like with a different soundtrack, with a different score, I don't think this movie works as well. The way that he captures the sort of like the wonder and the awe of everything, he nails it. It's like this movie came out at a time when idealism was not something people wanted to see in action films.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
I firmly believe that if it came out now with where we're at in the world, I think that it would be a way bigger success. And
it could. It works.
Yeah.
Like it works. Even the special effects still work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like, if I wish that we could get a 4K release and like do a 4K release, give us a director's cut, right?
Yeah.
Like let Andrew Stanton put some of the stuff back into the movie that they made him cut, right?
Yeah.
Like take it from a 2-hour movie to like a 2.5, 3-hour movie. Like let it be that. If Justice League can be 4 hours long, like absolute garbage, by the way, absolute garbage, not better than the Whedon cut. Like, let's be super clear about something. Zack Snyder's Justice League, not better than Joss Whedon's Justice League. Both just garbage, longer. Right? Like just longer. It is like, that is like saying that rotting fish corpse is better than that rotting raccoon carcass.
Dislike Justice League with that much passion.
I do.
Okay. Well,
but listen, with the trailer for James Gunn's Superman out in the world now, with that juxtaposition of like what we could have had this whole time versus what we got,
we weren't ready for it. We're ready for it now.
The world hadn't gotten bad enough yet.
That's true.
We need Justice League to push us in that direction first.
Okay.
But
yes, the Justice League is responsible for most of the bad things that have been happening in society.
But you think Zack Snyder fans don't vote for Trump? If you think Zack Snyder fans aren't voting for Trump, you are mistaken. Yeah, they are. These people are one and the same. Like these incels are the same people.
Wow. That is like a. I don't know. Okay. I mean, to each their own, but like. That's a big accusation.
I don't think that you understand the depth of depravity that the hardcore Snyder fans continue to purvey on the internet. Like they are some of the worst people on the internet. None of them are listening to this podcast, by the way. Like we're totally safe here.
I'm pretty sure that some Quiver fans were Zack Snyder fans.
Yeah, some Quiver fans were, but those people are long gone. Those people haven't listened to one of my podcasts in 5 or 6 years. Easily. Those are the people who were still saying that Arrow was good in season 7. Like their opinions don't mean anything. They say that Black Adam was a good movie. No. It's wild. But the way that that audience goes after women on the internet and harasses people, and they're not. Everybody listening to this except for you, Amanda, knows what I'm talking about and is like, but you are not terminally online. So
I'm not terminally online. Yeah. I guess I don't know.
You have better things to do.
I have, maybe that's fair.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you don't know this as well as I do.
I know, because I want to believe that I don't know, people should use the internet for good, everybody.
How aware of you? How aware are you of the current Sonic the Hedgehog fandom and what's been going on with Sonic the Hedgehog?
None aware. I just follow Ben Schwartz on most social platforms.
Yeah.
And so I'm aware that there is a Sonic movie, and that's about the extent of it.
So
what's happening?
No. So the Sonic the Hedgehog fandom, as these movies come out, which they're all three of them are brilliant movies. Every single one's a perfect 10, by the way.
Yeah, they look good.
And they just keep getting better. Like Sonic 3 is a literal, genuine. There's no irony in my voice here. It is a masterpiece. It's an incredible film. It's a kids movie, but as kids movies go, like it is expertly crafted. It is perfect. The dance sequence with 2 Jim Carreys is one of the most amazing things that's ever been put on film. Like it boggles the mind how great it is.
Jim Carrey is what a gem. What a peach.
Yeah. The best. The Sonic fandom is like in this incredible mode right now. So positive, so overjoyed and happy because these movies are so good. And just like, man, what a time to be alive. Yeah, the world's on fire. There's a literal criminal that's going to be the leader of the free world for a second time. Like we're like it's happening again. But Elon Musk is in control of everything.
Just continues to.
But the Sonic fandom is winning, right? And it's like that positivity of the Sonic fandom is the universe's like it's the Rey Skywalker to the Kylo Ren that is the Snyder verse.
That is the Snyder. I love that. That is
like
hilarious.
As that rose in darkness, the Sonic fandom has risen in light. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some very dark and disgusting corners of the Sonic fandom, and we're not talking about those people. The Sonic fandom can be a fairly toxic place as well. All fandoms are, right? But the one that's like in the sort of like in the spotlight right now with this movie being out, it's like. Yeah. Anyways, wild tangent all the way back to John Carter. The point of all of that being that like that group is the group that is like gonna bristle at a movie like John Carter, right? And unfortunately, like that group is a very vocal minority that somehow holds sway. I mean, the way that Disney has been making decisions with Star Wars and Marvel in the last 4 years is in direct response to those types of people on the internet. And it has been damaging to both of those brands and to the creative projects that are coming out of them. Like just full stop. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been great things. Acolyte was awesome. Skeleton Crew is awesome. Lucasfilm was making great stuff. They're just like, they put it out and then this part of the fandom reacts the way that they do. And Disney cancels follow-ups, right? And to me, that is connected intrinsically to this film because this is where it starts. Like this is where that whole mentality of like just cut it, just like cut our losses,
just let it go,
take the hit, it'll like it's gonna be a box office failure and it might hit our stock a little bit, but what we will tell the investors is that because it performed so poorly, we're going to be able to get all of these tax breaks at the end of the year, and we're going to recover our losses on these tax breaks, so don't worry about it. That was the narrative, right? That narrative started the thinking that led to Batgirl being shelved forever. We'll never see that movie, right? Acme versus Coyote versus Acme or whatever, like the Looney Tunes movie that is apparently, from everybody who worked on it and people who saw the cut of it, like a brilliant, like an incredible movie. Looney Tunes movie? Yeah, and it's like, so the concept of the film was that Wile E. Coyote is suing Acme for all of the faulty garbage that they've sold him over the years as hilarious. He's tried to catch the Roadrunner, right? Like because it's always like
I love that.
Yeah,
so great.
I think it's Will Ferrell is like the human counterpart in it, and
Oh,
like
amazing.
and apparently from everybody who worked on it, everybody who's seen the movie in its entirety, they're all like, this movie was great. Like, this was going to be like a massive comeback for the Looney Tunes. It was going to be as
Nice.
big as Space Jam was back in the 90s. Like,
Wow.
this was going to be like transformative for that brand. And then Warner Brothers was like, we can make more money off of this by canning it. Even though it's done, it's ready to be released. And all of that, to like, from where I'm sitting, my perspective on things, all of that starts with John Carter. It's the first movie that fell to that way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. And then they saw that they could do it. There was a precedent for it, and no backlash, no real consequences.
Absolutely no consequences, because later that year they release Frozen, and they buy Star Wars, and Disney's stock is higher than it's ever been, right? For a brief period. But it's
I feel like Frozen was the year after, because I feel like it was.
It's Frozen 2013. Maybe Frozen is 2013. Might be the next year. But so like close, in any case, it's like right before Disney it becomes a monolith again, right? Because they did have a little bit of a rough go there until they bought Marvel, and then like got the Avengers sort of in place and all of that sort of thing. But it's a very frustrating thing. Like, Crystal will tell you how many times I was like cursing the sky while watching this movie the other night, where I was just I'm so mad 12 years later that this movie got the treatment that it did, because I don't know. Is it genuinely as good as I feel that it is, or is it just that much of a like straight down the middle my taste in film, right? And storytelling. Like, is it just that it hits and connects for me so perfectly, or is it actually that good? I don't know. But that is when I say this movie is a definitive perfect 10, that's what I'm talking about, right? Because a perfect 10 is not about it being an objective 10 out of 10. A perfect 10 is like, as far as I'm concerned, change nothing, right? Like, everyone should love this movie.
And everybody should watch this movie. If you haven't, it's weird for you to listen to this podcast without having watched this movie, but if you haven't watched this movie,
I've got IMDb open right now as we record, and it's playing a scene from the film, and it's the one like when they're figuring out that he's from Earth, and that now he's on Mars, right? And they do the diagram of like, 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of thing. And you've got Taylor Kitsch, and his titties are out. Right,
as they are for most of the film.
Oh, like 90% of the movie, just
no shirt,
just nips as far as the eye can see, right? And he's almost like hairless from the neck down. Just beautiful, just a beautiful specimen of a man standing next to Lynn Collins, who is in this awesome armor crop top. Great. Just with the belly button out, and the low rise bikini bottom with a.
I love that she disparages her wedding outfit as if it's different from the other things that she's been wearing throughout.
She's got cleavage. She's got cleavage, so she refers to it as vulgar. She's like, and which is a joke for the Deja Thoris fans, because in the comic books and in the novel, she's just topless in that, right? Like, just on full display. But I see that image of the two of them standing side by side. This is two of the most beautiful human beings that have ever graced the earth. And they're just like, they're dirty and glistening and armored and I just I don't understand. I don't understand what people want from film if this is not it. Because honestly, that's what I'm looking for here, people. Like, that's what I want. Give me all the other stuff that we've talked about, all this like highfalutin conversation, this like, I deep analysis of the historical context, the dramaturgy of it, whatever. That's all great. I love it. That all needs to be there too. But if you can do all of that and then also also have two incredibly hot people half naked on screen with just like electric chemistry. That I don't understand how that movie doesn't make all the money and doesn't have the biggest fandom. And I am going to say something that I think is probably going to get a couple of people going like, I don't know what you're talking about, Mike. But as far as I'm concerned, having just watched this movie 2 nights ago for the first time in I think like 4, maybe 5 years, if I'm being honest, like it's been a while. I think this movie is better than any of the films that Disney has put out in like that Lucasfilm has put out in the Disney era. I think it is. I don't is this movie better than Solo? Because that's my favorite. Yeah, I think it's better. Is it better than The Last Jedi? It's like toe to toe, man. It's toe to toe with Last Jedi as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, because The Last Jedi is a great movie, but The Last Jedi is contentious for a reason, right?
Well,
like,
yeah,
like you and I can agree that The Last Jedi is a brilliant piece of filmmaking, but the things about it that a lot of people have problems with, I understand why they have problems.
Right.
I don't agree with them. I think that they
Yeah.
need to take another look at it and they need to be a little bit more objective and they need to have a better understanding of storytelling and that, you know, and they need to let go of their love for a Luke Skywalker that never existed. Right. But that's also not their fault. Luke Skywalker was presented as a thing for 30 years.
Right.
And then The Last Jedi came out and was an actual sequel to the story that was told in the films and had nothing to do with all of these comic books and novels that came out. And so it ignores the superhero Luke Skywalker that's in all of that stuff and portrays him as a real person, right? And so it's like, and that's it's I don't think it's a mistake. I understand why some people are ruffled by it, right? So it's like I look at The Last Jedi and it's like I get it. Like I get why some people are going to have as many issues as they do with this movie. And there's other stuff. That's a completely different podcast. But this movie,
perfect 10.
The thing about it is that like all of those Star Wars movies are coming along and they are trying to recapture something. And then in the same way that The Matrix and Avatar come along and just like absolutely eat Star Wars' lunch, right? Like they just like The Matrix comes out in 1999 and so does The Phantom Menace. Like those movies came out within weeks of each other, right? And
yeah.
And the narrative there is that, well, The Matrix is by far the better movie than The Phantom Menace. And I think that's academic, right? It's not even close. And I love The Phantom Menace. Did an episode for the anniversary this past year that of like, I think everybody's wrong. This is actually a very good movie. That said, The Matrix is one of the 10 best movies ever made. Like it just is, right? That first one is just incredible and has only gotten better with age, I think. And with context and with knowing more about the Wachowskis. We did a whole thing on the Thunderquack podcast about this, so you guys can go back and listen to those episodes.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely
in the lead up to Resurrections, right? But but yeah, like those movies come along and just like obliterate Star Wars in the eyes of pop culture. Not the original Star Wars, but like sort of like where like the placement of Star Wars in pop culture at the time, right? Like they just come along and they prove that, you know, you can keep making sequels, but when you make sequels, generally what you're doing is just trying to recapture lightning in a bottle, right? And it's always going to be compared. It's always going to be that sort of thing. John Carter is a movie that comes along like The Matrix, like the first Avatar film, and is like, well, here's a bunch of stuff that we've never seen presented in a way that we've never gotten it, right? Like it and the experience that I had with this in the theater walking out of, I mean, it wasn't even walking out of it. I still remember sitting in that seat when the credits were rolling and like looking at Crystal and being like, I didn't think that I was going to feel this way in a movie theater ever again.
Wow.
Because it was the way that I felt with Star Wars, right? Where it was like the whole time I'm sitting there going like, I just want to be there. I want to be in the movie. I want this to be reality. And that's how I feel about Star Wars. And it kills me. I mean, like I can remember saying to her like, oh, you know what they need to do? They need to have a ride at Disneyland that is like in Tomorrowland. That's like a John Carter ride in Tomorrowland. This is before the movie flops and all that, right? I'm like, oh, they need to like, you have to have like the ride in Tomorrowland, but the entrance to it is somehow in Frontierland.
Frontierland. Oh my gosh.
Right?
That is brilliant.
You like go into a cave.
Frontierland and you exit in Tomorrowland. Come on, Mike.
I was describing Galaxy's Edge before.
Oh yeah.
Before we knew that Disney had bought Star Wars, right? Yes. Because that's literally like that is literally what Galaxy's Edge. You go from Frontierland. One of the entrances is in Frontierland.
Oh yeah.
You go from Frontierland into Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my god. There's an alternate timeline where this movie didn't get treated this way. And where like it became massive.
And Galaxy's Edge still exists, but it's just John Carter.
But it's Barsoom. Like you go into a cave in Frontierland and you come out on Barsoom, and you can get your picture with Deja Thorus.
Oh my gosh.
And you know Tars Tarkas and every kid has a Woola stuffy. How is that not a thing? Because that character is so perfect.
The freaking best.
He is so adorable, so lovable, so endearing. We're an hour and 31 minutes into this recording, and I'm just bringing up Woola, and it's like, and I could talk for half an hour about that little 6-legged frog dog. Like it just, this movie literally has everything that I want in a movie, everything, and most importantly, it has the thing that is missing from Star Wars that I don't know that is ever going to properly come back to Star Wars. We got a little bit of it in The Acolyte, and the response to The Acolyte was what it was, and I don't think that we're ever going to get it again. And that is just like, it's horny, like, and like. Sci-fi can be horny. It's okay, guys. It's all right. Like just the thing about it is just like, don't objectify, right? Like if you're not objectifying the characters, you can be as horny as you want. The problem is when you forego characterization for big boobs, right? Like
there's a fine line.
It is a super fine line, and it's a dangerous one to walk. But when you do it well, you know, you get a movie like this that is so hot. Like these two characters are just like, they're incredible to look at, and it's fun just to watch them. And then also they're giving great performances, and like there's a lot of like heart and all that sort of thing in it. And it's just, man, I don't know. I feel like I'm back in 2012, and I'm just like, I'm fighting this fight again, and everybody is just like, just ignore, like I'm the village idiot, right? Like there's he's talking about John Carter again. Just ignore him. Just I don't know. If he keeps going, we'll just start throwing rotten vegetables at him, and he'll stop. And they're wrong. I won't. I had kind of left it behind a little bit, Amanda. You understand?
I'm feeling there's a lot of emotions that are happening.
I had kind of like, I think I had buried it. I think because of the trauma of the experience of this movie, right? And rewatching it for this episode, it's like, Crystal said to me, she's like, yeah, it's like, it's all coming back, isn't it? I'm like, it's like, I can't handle it. It's like, yeah, it is. Like, it all like has like flooded back. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I can hear it. Like, she said that. She's like, I can hear it. Like, it's, yeah. I was like, I'm sorry. I apologize for telling you all of these things that you already know from, 12 years ago, having to listen to me rant about this movie for a solid year as we were like tried to campaign to get them to make a sequel. And it's like, it was such a fruitless effort because all that money went into Star Wars. All that money went into Star Wars. But you know what? So, they don't have any faith in Star Wars now. Right? Like Disney is so treating Star Wars so poorly that maybe now is the right time to push for the John Carter sequel. Yeah. I think Taylor Kitsch looks enough like he did back then. To come
there you go.
I don't know. I don't know how Lynn Collins is faring, but I'm sure she's still beautiful. Like I'm sure she's still stunning, right? Like like I don't know. I say this podcast is
gonna be the catalyst for.
It's the first step. It's the first step because that's what I said. Like I said before, it's like, how do I get Book Talk to do? And Crystal was like, if only you could like record something and put it out on the internet. And I was like, that's kind of what I do. It's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no one's listening. But no. I don't know. I think I'm just gonna have to like cut this conversation up and put it on TikTok.
There you go. You just have to like make little snippets that are very ear candy.
Yeah.
Get people excited about it.
Hopefully we've said stuff that is worthy of that. And that
we're always worthy of TikTok snippets. I think it's all gold. It's all gold.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Is there anything else you want to talk about with John Carter before we close it out?
I think we've talked a lot about a lot of stuff. It's I mean, shout out to the fact that like I think it's Daryl Sabera, right, is the guy that plays Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah.
Who like will forever now to me be Meghan Trainor's husband, and I just absolutely love that he solidified himself in pop culture.
He's one of the two Spy Kids.
I know.
Yeah.
That's good. Anyways.
Awesome. Yeah.
So that's my last. It was good. I forgot that character existed, and so it was the first thing, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's exciting. So
awesome,
cool.
Cool. Well, that's it. That's it. Great episode, I think. Thank you guys for listening to Thunderquack Perfect 10. If you found joy in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast service and leave a rating and review. Please, 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 please share this one with people. Here's the thing. This was going to be like the exclusive, right? Like we did with the pledge drive. Yes. That was my original plan, because I was like, oh, we're going to talk about John Carter. It's Amanda and I talking about John Carter. A bunch of people will like want to tune in for that. So they'll go and subscribe to Patreon. Watching the movie, I was like, no,
it has to be for everybody.
The things I have to say about this movie need to be heard. They need to be heard. So all 12 of you are going to be able to listen on the podcast feed as well. But please, 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 if you know anybody who was a fan of this movie in 2012 when it came out, please share this episode with them, so that they can also relive the trauma and pain and join me on the internet screaming into the void for a sequel to this movie 12 years later. And if you want to chat about today's episode, you can head over to our Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord, where I will continue ranting and raving about this film.
The movie.
And posting GIFs and remarking how beautiful Taylor Kitsch and Lynn Collins are. Even James Purefoy as well. James Purefoy is very pretty lovely in this movie.
Yes, he is.
Mark Strong, unfortunately, is not being done any favors
he was not
in the wrinkly boot. But he's
always kind of that to me.
So Mark Strong's also in the Kingsman movies, right? And he's like the Q the James Bond sort of idea of things, right? He's the gadget guy. And there are a couple of moments in those movies where he's in a nice suit and everything, right? Because they're the Kingsmen, so they're all like, these dapper, well-dressed men. And there's a couple of moments, I think in the second one in particular, where you get like sort of like he's in like sort of the waistcoat and slacks, and you're like, Mark Strong's hot. like that's an attractive man. Like a lot of the movies that he's in, you're right, like they're kind of hiding it. He's not he's been cast as like this sort of character actor that plays a lot of villains, right? But is, you know what, Mark Strong and Stanley Tucci are like twins.
Oh no, come on.
They are. You put them next to each other.
As
put them side by
Stanley
side.
Tucci and is indifferent to Mark Strong. Okay, fine. He's hot in The Kingsman. I'm sorry, I just pulled him up on IMDb literally as you said that, and it's like a picture of him in a suit.
Because he's got the glasses. Because he's got the glasses. Okay. It does so much, right?
It does so much. The suit and the glasses. That's all you need.
Ties it all together. It ties it all together. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Him and the Tooch. Put them both in a movie together.
Strong and Tooch.
Oh my god. Because Stanley Tucci is another one of those actors where it's like a lot of his roles he's sort of playing like these comedic characters or like sort of like these background support.
Stanley Tucci is the best.
Stanley Tucci is super hot. He is a very sexy man. And what's the Emma Stone movie? Easy A.
Yeah, Easy A.
He's the dad in Easy A.
Yeah.
And he wears a Henley at one point in that movie. And I'm like, that's what it's supposed to look like when you wear a Henley. I put on a Henley and it's like, no, take it off. No, that's not right. Henleys look awful, right? But he's wearing a Henley in that movie. And it's like, oh, Stanley Tucci, whatever his name is in the Hunger Game movies, right? Because he's the announcer guy, right?
Yeah.
And he's in all these like ridiculous outfits with the crazy hair and whatever. And it's like, that's how most people think of Stanley Tucci. But then like you see him in that movie and you're like, no, that's a sexy man. That's a very sexy actor, man.
He's
Anyways,
he's delightful. And I will say, now looking at them both, I'm like, yes, they do look quite
they look like brothers, right?
They look, especially with the glasses, like when they both, okay.
Yeah. I very much believe that Mark Strong and Stanley Tucci should star in a film together, it would be a great thing for everybody. We'd all be really happy with it. That's it for the podcast. I'm so glad that we got that in right at the end, just at the buzzer. After the outro, we did it all. We
always do that.
There's always one more
after the outro.
There's always one more thing. But I haven't said the actual closing line yet, so we're good.
No, we're still in the safe zone. How exciting is it that you still say the last catchphrase to like when you leave? I
have to.
I know.
So. Good. Without further ado, until next time, remember, it's not about the score. It's about the love. Stay frosty. Thunderquack Perfect 10 is hosted by me, Michael Cohen. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at TQPerfect10 and join the community at thunderquack.com/Discord. This podcast is supported by listeners just like you over at patreon.com/Thunderquack. Head over there to get early access to episodes, exclusive podcasts, and more. This show is a part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network. Head over to thunderquack.com for more great shows. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.